So you want to become a self-employed medical biller. And whether that is starting a medical billing business or doing it on the side while you have a full-time job, all you keep hearing from people is that you need lots and lots of clients to get a lot of money. But what if you don't want a lot of clients? What if right now you have, let's say, one client or two clients and you feel like they're paying you, but you're not making any money? It could be because of these three mistakes that are destroying your profits. My name is Tamika. I'm a certified professional biller and a certified professional practice manager. I'm also a self-employed medical biller. And all I used to hear was that you need to get as many clients as you can in order to make lots and lots of money. But I never really wanted a lot of clients. Up until this point, as a full-time self-employed medical biller, I still don't want a lot of clients. But I do want to make sure that I make a good profit so that I can live off of the money that I'm making. First, we need to talk about revenue versus profit. And I think this is really important to talk about first because many times as a new business owner, as a new self-employed medical biller, you don't know what that really means. Now, revenue is how much you bring in. So if you decide that you're going to charge a client $2,500, if you decide you're going to charge a client 7% of their total revenue, whatever that comes out to, let's say $3,000, whatever it is, that is your revenue. That is how much you are bringing in. And I did a video that I'll link above that spoke about 100K in revenue, because you know 100K is that number that everyone wants to reach. But in that video, I spoke about revenue, not profit. And what is profit? Profit is the revenue that you bring in minus the expenses. Because as a self-employed medical biller, whether that's a billing business, like I said, or a side hustle or whatever you want to call it, you still will have expenses that you need to pay for that is going to cut into this revenue. So when you're factoring in certain things for your medical billing business, you need to make sure that you keep this in mind. So when you hear these two things, or when you're thinking about these two things when you're working in your business, you will have an idea and you can understand it better at the end of the day. The first mistake is that you're not building systems. Systems in a business will make or break that business, because in order to make sure that you are working efficiently and effectively, you would need to make sure that you have systems in place to do that. So one of the first systems you need to make sure you have is an operations workflow. An operations workflow is basically what you're doing and how you're going to do it. So in the medical billing business, you are the person who is sending out the claims, doing AR, payment posting, all those good things. But you need to make sure that there is an actual workflow and an actual system to that. So instead of just doing things willy-nilly whenever you feel like doing it, you have a certain set of steps or procedures or processes and how to do it so that it can be done efficiently each time. So if you're charging a provider by percentage or by flat rate, and I'm only mentioning those two because there are other ways to charge, which I will link videos above about other ways to charge, but I specifically only really like to use percentage or by flat rate. So if you're charging a provider that way, then you're going to need to know how to maximize that. So if you're charging a client by percentage and you are all over the place, it takes you hours and hours to send out claims, to payment post, to do all of those things, you're missing claims, you're not putting in stuff, the provider is unhappy, then you're going to be losing money for the provider, which is in fact losing money for yourself because you're charging by percentage. And then the provider is not going to be receiving money. Since you are charging by percentage, you're taking a percent of the money that the provider brings in, or the revenue that the provider brings in. You're taking a percentage of that. And if you're not having your operations and your workflows together, then you're not going to get paid much. And also, if you are charging by flat rate, then you may be receiving that money consistently monthly, but if your operations and your workflows are not working, then the provider is going to start seeing that, and you're probably going to get fired. You're probably going to be getting a lot of complaints, and they're going to be switching you in and out. And so your consistent flat rate fee that you're getting paid every month will eventually stop. So you don't want to mess up your profits by not even receiving money at all. You want your operations to be strong workflow operations so that you can continue to keep the providers that you have and bring in their revenue for their practices. You also want to have systems in place that will help you save time. Now, we all say that time is money. We all know that. But it really is when it comes to medical billing. So if you say that you need a certain amount of clients in order to bring in a certain amount of money, in order to keep a certain profit of that money, then you need to make sure that your time is being spent well. So if you are taking an excessive amount of time to do your duties, to do your regular everyday job, then you're not going to be able to take on probably even 2 clients. That one client, depending on how big or small they are, might take up all of your time because now your operations and your workflows are not right. They're not set. And you don't have a habit or routine for them. So you're losing clients because you can't take on anymore. It's just you for the most part at the beginning. That's usually how it is. And so you want to be able to scale and have a couple more clients, even if it's just 2 or 3 or 4, depending on your goals. So you want to make sure that you build workflows that will help you do your job and do it efficiently in a certain amount of time, so that you can then have as much clients as you need to meet your revenue goals. And by the way, if you have any questions about any of the 3 mistakes that I mentioned in this video, be sure to schedule a remote one-on-one with me where you can ask me your questions directly. I always leave the link below in the description box. And if you were wondering where I got this t-shirt from, it is in my shop. The link is always in the description box as well, and there are 3 other beautiful colors that I'm sure you will enjoy. The second mistake is that you are pricing too low. Now, pricing is subjective, so low and high is also subjective, because you need to come up with this amount or this figure depending on you, what you're doing, the services you are providing, your value that you are bringing, your experience. All of these things need to be factored in. So first, you might be pricing too low because you are just pulling numbers out of the air. And I say that because I have done that several occasions. I'm not proud of it, but I want you to know not to pull numbers out of the air. You want to set your prices on things that matter, such as your labor, such as expenses that you have. You want to factor all of these things in when you are setting a price for a specific provider. Again, it's not a one-all be-all, at least for me, because each provider for me is different. Make sure you factor in the goals as far as how much revenue or your profits that you want to have after all of this is done. And you also want to make sure that you are factoring in taxes. And I'm bringing up taxes because we're in April and this is tax season, unfortunately. And so we all have to deal with paying our taxes. So when you're pricing your services, you need to factor in how much you're going to owe in taxes if you get in a specific amount from a provider. So for example, you decide that you need to bring in an extra $1,000 a month. That is awesome. That is great. But you don't want to charge $1,000 because you're not going to bring in that whole $1,000. When that provider pays you $1,000, they're not taking out any taxes as they would in your full-time job. So you have to factor in 15, 20, 30% in taxes depending on where you live, the state tax, the federal tax, the self-employment tax. We have gross receipts tax. There are a lot of different taxes when it comes to being a self-employed medical biller. So you need to factor that in as well, because you might be thinking that you're bringing home or making a certain amount of money, but you're actually not, and your profits are being cut low, low, low. And the third mistake is high overhead. So what is overhead? Overhead is the expenses that you have. Now, if you are a home-based medical biller, then your overhead will most likely be a little bit lower or a lot lower than what you would be paying if you had an actual physical office. Also, if you're home-based and you're just starting out, maybe you don't have any employees, so you don't have to pay them, but there are going to be some other things that you have to pay, such as insurance or supplies, or any other thing that you think is important for you to run your medical billing business. But what you don't want to do is buy unnecessary things. So for me, when I first started out and I started to notice that I was bringing in a certain amount of money, I was saying, oh, okay, well, I have money for a new printer. And I brought in $1,000. Okay, great. I have money for an updated keyboard. I have money for ABC. Like, as you see money coming into your account, you can get excited and you can be like, I have money to do this. But you don't want to be buying unnecessary things. We already went over with expenses. We already went over taxes. And so you want to make sure that you're keeping this in mind and that you're just not buying things for buying things' sake, or because you think you have money or you see money in your account and so you're going to spend it. You want to keep your overhead low. And as a medical biller, a home-based, self-employed medical biller, your overhead can be low. Your expenses can be low. And you don't have to necessarily spend all the things that you would spend if you actually had a physical office or employees or any of those other things. And this could definitely happen if you are not keeping track of your income and your expenses. So if you're one of those medical billers that, you have a client, let's say one client, this client pays you $1,500 a month. And so all you're thinking about is what's coming in. And you're checking your account and you're noticing I have $1,500 this month, and then I have $2,000 the next month. All you're seeing is that. But you are not seeing all the other things that may come out, things that you're paying. And a good way to do that is with a bookkeeping system. Now, I use Zoho. I used to use QuickBooks, but there are so many other bookkeeping systems out there. And it has helped me a lot because putting in the information daily or weekly to let me see where I really am, see the real numbers and figures of what I can do. So I can pull up a report that tells me that I spent $500 in supplies in March. Do I really want to spend $500 in supplies in March? Probably not, because it's not necessary if it's only me. If I'm using the computer most of the time, I'm not using too much paper. So what am I doing? It helps you analyze and audit your expenses and your income and what you're dealing with. So having a bookkeeping system really is helpful. Now for me, Zoho is free right now, but there are some that has a little price to it. And sometimes I think it's worth it. It depends again on how much you're bringing in and what you're doing, what kind of business, which with medical billing, we don't necessarily have like inventory or, any of these other big things. So we can probably just use the free versions of most of these bookkeeping systems. But having a bookkeeping system is important. And if you decide that you're not going to have a bookkeeping system, you can also just even have an Excel spreadsheet or a Google sheet where you keep the numbers and you keep the figures there, where you can pull up reports of certain things, see where you're overspending, see where what's important from what's not important, and then that can help you bring in more profits. And if you're new with being self-employed, it would probably be best or a good idea for you to do your research, to try and figure out, okay, what is it that I'm going to need to maybe start this business, to run it day to day? What are the things that I will need to do that? So keeping that in mind, instead of just buying things or new flashy things that people tell you about, oh, we can help you send out claims faster by doing this. Oh, you can, buy this software and it can help you do this. All of this is money that you may not have to spend. So do your research and just check and see if these are things that will actually help you or hinder you. Make sure you comment below the amount of profit you would like to keep as a self-employed medical biller, and I will see you again in my next video.